Hi all, and welcome back to the neighborhood. Keep Hi-Fi sent over the new KBEAR, or KBEAR, or however you want to say it, ink. This is a follow-up to the KBEAR Diamond, which had a bit of a cult following. I never got to hear the Diamond, but by all accounts, this is at least somewhat of an upgrade, so let's get into it. Since I never had the chance to review the original Diamond or its sister IM, the Believe, I don't really have a good frame of reference, but I'm told that the shell of the ink is a similar build if not identical in a number of ways. The shell is constructed mostly of metal with a high gloss resin faceplate. Its shape is almost that of a half moon and it's somewhat thin in its profile. The angle of the gold-plated nozzle is well done, and these fit in my ear rather shallow, but with great comfort and ease. These have a bit of weight to them, so you know they have a quality construction, but I wouldn't call them heavy, and when in my ear they virtually disappear to my perception. The connection at the base of the IM is a non-recessed 2-pin, and the ink comes with the same style of cable that came with the Tri-Meteor. Again, this cable reminds me of The Rain Super Duper Fly music video from Missy Elliott, but I really like the metal hardware here. It's not too large nor too small, it appears relatively rugged, and the Y-split has a nice metal integrated chin cinch. Other companies could learn a thing or two from KBEAR here. The package these come with includes a unique wideboard tip which appears specifically chosen for this IEM. These are displayed beneath the IM itself, and the small set comes affixed to it. Nevertheless, additional alternative tips in a similar style to the tips that came with the i3 Pro, Meteor, and other Tri products recently are also provided, along with a plastic cleaning brush. Additionally, there's also a brown leather carrying case, again similar to the ones that came with the i3 Pro, the Meteor, and other Tri products, but this one is stamped with the KBEAR emblem rather than the Tri one. The sound of the ink is pretty decent. It's a V-shaped affair, and for its price, the quality of resolution and detail one gets is pretty darn good. I'd say from this perspective, it at least keeps up with other standout IEMs around $75 or so. I'm not in love with the tuning, however, as this is a fairly V-shaped affair. The low bass and sub bass are overdone and bleed slightly, overtaking the rest of the mix in a manner that cannot go without notice, especially on bass-centric tracks. With that said, people knew what they were getting into with the Diamond, and in association, I'm fairly sure people will understand what they're getting into with the ink. This is a basshead's IEM, and for a basshead set, I'm sure the ink will have a number of fans. My wife is a basshead, and she enjoys the additional low-end emphasis of the set and was surprised by its level of detail. Like many bassheads, she's willing to sacrifice an accurate reproduction for enjoyment. Still, the ink's mids are without a doubt recessed, and the treble is rolled off and underemphasized. When putting the ink to the test, I had to notably raise the volume of the ink to higher levels than I normally would to get its mids to sufficient listening levels, and in doing so, the bass would simply become too much for me on a variety of tracks, especially songs with a significant low-end emphasis. This observation was track dependent, however, and on other music the low end of the ink would blend better. Vocals are rarely forward and notably back in the mix. This applied both to male and female vocals, but male vocals were more victimized than female ones. Vocal clarity was good, but voices were almost veiled from a presence standpoint. From a treble perspective, sounds from this portion of the ink's frequency response are still heard, but its top end is still rather relaxed in its character, and one's ears do have to stretch to hear sonics at times, especially those from the later treble region. Graphs of this set show a dip after 6K, followed by a peak at 8K before things start to slope off again. But this peak at 8K is also likely a measurement error, and to my ears things gradually slope in a downward direction from about the 5K mark or so. There's limited sparkle, and the general treble presentation also seems to be a bit dull at times. Soundstage is average to just above average and nothing to write home about. Separation is fine, but guitar strums did blend together auditorily rather than the listener being able to hear each individual string of the chord. The song She Talks to Angels by the Black Crowes notably displayed this phenomenon. Macrodynamics are decent, but overly intense at times, while microdynamics are notably a struggle for the ink, especially among sonics coming from the mid-range or the treble. Transient reproduction is unremarkable, but instrument distinctiveness will still be sufficient for most listeners. And it may seem like I'm picking on the ink, but it's actually pretty decent for a basshead's IEM. Like I've said, its clarity and resolution are surprising, even if I find its tuning underwhelming. The bass is not nearly as overbaked as something like the Blon BL-07, an IEM that fits so good and sounds so bad that I ultimately decided it was unredeemable and I refused to do a review. Regarding the BL-07 more specifically, it simply isn't worth my time. In contrast, the ink is enjoyable still. It just goes slightly too far in its particular style and overly influences tracks a bit too much on the bottom end for me to make it a general recommendation for the masses. Out of the ear tips in the box, I preferred the colored alternative tips that came in the bag with the cleaning brush, as these controlled the sub-bass and lowered the bass bloom of the ink a bit more. Still, JVC spiral dots controlled the ink's low-end reproduction to an even greater extent, added some positive soundstage, and were my preferred tip for this set out of the ear tips that I experimented with. I also enjoyed SpinFit 360s and Dakoni foams with the ink. The shorter bore of the 360 disallowed bass energy from developing as much, and the Dakoni foam seemed to absorb it. Dakoni foam tips produced a better top-end reproduction with increased air and ambience, and were also a good option for the ink, but may neuter the low end a bit too much for some. Compared to my general go-to V-shaped bass head recommendation in the price range, the Blon A8, the bass of the A8 stays out of the way more and is more coherent in the overall sound of that IEM. The A8 also has a greater treble presence and a more powerful vocal reproduction, better general staging properties, and an additional wow factor. The ink is no slouch, but the A8 continues to be one of the most underrated IEMs in the price range in my opinion. A review of the A8 has been up on my website for quite a while now, but the ink has motivated me to get to a video review of that one soon as well. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on to get alerted when I upload that review. For now, I'll place a link to the written review in the description below. For ease of access, I'll also embed a future link to that video review on the website's A8 page when it gets released. But, returning to the ink for now, even with the A8 in mind, it could still be a recommendation for people that desire a bit more girth to their bottom end and a softer, more relaxed treble reproduction. For example, the presence of the bass line on Blind Melon's No Rain is more apparent, looming, and diffuse than I am used to on that track, but it's still enjoyable nevertheless. And for those that stumble into the ink and find its low-end reproduction a bit too domineering, give Dakoni foam ear tips a shot. They might just save this set for you if you do. But before I go, again, I'd truly appreciate it if you join the neighborhood and subscribe to the channel. My analytics suggest that many of my viewers are not subscribed, and it really helps the channel to be able to provide the community with its most outstanding reviews if everyone shows their support by subscribing. Also consider joining the Discord, the uber cheap Patreon, or follow the channel at www.InToItReviews.com, Twitter, or Instagram. Links will be provided in the description below. And with that, I'm out for now.